Hello there, I'm Ben and welcome to Field and Foley episode 28. Introducing Tony Manfredonia, a Michigan-based composer and singer-songwriter known for his emotive and captivating music. From epic symphonic rock to tender pop piano ballads, Tony's genre-defying sound takes listeners on extraordinary journeys. Performing worldwide with esteemed ensembles like the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra and collaborating with artists such as the Accidentals and Bob James. Tony Manfredonia's versatility and profound compositions leave an indelible mark on audiences. Welcome, Tony, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
I hope I got everything right, because you're doing a lot of stuff.
You did.
That's
yep,
awesome.
It's basically just whatever floats my boat on a given month is what I'm creating.
That's awesome.
Usually with an orchestra is where it goes.
Yeah. So let's dive right into what your typical day looks like. I mean, you're a composer. Like, that's your thing. You're mainly a composer.
Yeah.
So what is your typical day like?
So I get up around between 5:30 and 6 is usually like my sweet spot. I'm an early to bed, early to rise kind of guy. Start my day. You and I will relate to this. Start my day with the Wim Hof method, the Wim Hof breathing.
Yeah.
Every morning, literally every morning I do the breathing. Sometimes the cold shower or the ice bath is right afterwards. Sometimes it's like I do a few things here and there, and then I jump in the cold shower. It doesn't really matter. But really, I start my day with the breathing. Prayer, breathing, that is like my go-to sets the day situation. From there, cold water, whether it's the ice bath or the cold shower, and then breakfast, coffee, then pretty much straight into the creative work, right? So I think a lot of times folks think that composers or artists of any type just sit around and make music all day. Well, it's like half my day. Half my day is the creative stuff, like sitting down for 4 to 5 to 6 hours straight, just pumping out music. And then after that, it's like, all right, maybe I'll go to the gym, or maybe I have to make some phone calls or have an appointment, or the more admin type stuff, right? Like, that's kind of my second half of the day, or the second third, or the second quarter, whatever it looks like. But I try to front load all of my creative work as soon as I'm done my sort of morning routine. Because that's when I'm most creative. It's almost like once it hits 2 p.m., like the creative juices start going down, but I still have energy. So that I'll use that energy for, again, admin, phone calls, if I have to do any invoicing, whatever, anything of that sort is like my afternoon. But then if I have some time left over is when I'll do my more music for music's sake, I guess, my more personal music, my albums, all that kind of stuff. It's going to either be like late afternoon before dinner or evening time, like before bed. So when my wife is kind of getting ready for bed, she has her nighttime routine. That's when I'll spend maybe an hour or so doing my own music for the sake of just making music outside of contract work,
Yeah.
Because it was probably back in 2020, after many years of not doing that and just doing contract work, that I was like, I need to bring this back. I need to get back into the thing that got me into music to begin with, So it's tough. It's a lot. It's a bit of juggling. Sometimes I'm teaching lessons. Sometimes I'm driving an hour away to do a concert. It's a bit of, I feel like musicians just have to wear a lot of hats, right? So it's blocking out that time of, this is number one priority that I have to do in the morning every day. After that, it depends. So
Yeah.
Long-winded answer.
No, it's fine.
I wish it were a very simple, this is what my Tuesday looks like, but no, it is literally, it's always a bit of a ride.
But it's always interesting. I mean, we've had that talk briefly before, but I'm the exact opposite. I'm not creative in the mornings at all. And
Okay.
I used to say that when the clock has a one-digit number, it's still nighttime. So everything after 10 is like my morning, usually.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to get up now earlier as well, of course, because of my daughter and because of like other work stuff. But I do the exact opposite. I do all the admin stuff and things in the mornings, and I like, it starts like after lunch or something that I start to get like itchy for creative stuff, and then it goes well into the night.
Right.
But yeah, you should find someone like that and make a studio, so you have like the opportunity to have always phone calls. Doesn't matter when, just the person might change.
Well, and it really depends on, I think, on like the the domestic dynamic, right? Like within the home. So for example, like my wife, she's her one of her love languages, I guess you want to call it that, is like quality time. And her kind of optimal time with the most of her energy is like evening and nighttime, right? So even though I might have creativity, when it's 5, 6, 7 p.m., which sometimes happens, that's like her prime time. So that's the time that usually I don't work any later than 5:30, 6 o'clock. Once it hits 6 o'clock, I am done for like everything I really, really need to do. And then we have a solid 5 hours, and I might, 4 or 5 hours. Then I might do a little more before bed, like I mentioned. But it really, like that, the whole schedule, for lack of better words, is really based around. So we make sure that we have time together every day, like a solid chunk of time every day, because then that just keeps us grounded, keeps us in the right headspace and stuff too.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's the same for me. It's like before dinner, when my kid comes home, I try to spend a bit of time with her. And of course, after dinner is like after dinner and until her bedtime, it's just the opportunity to spend a few hours with my daughter every day, and it's like my priority one, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, as you also said, like in the evenings with my wife, like spending time with her. But most of the time, then she goes to bed because she's more of an early riser than I am, and then usually I work 2 or 3 hours after that. And it's very quiet, which is great for recording, of course. Nobody's like walking around in the house. It's like everything is quieted down. So and speaking more specifically about your creative process for music for video games, could you maybe walk us through how you like approach a new project?
Approach a new project?
Yeah, like a video game.
Like if
project.
I get hired for like something new, brand new.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So my first question to the developer is always, please provide anything that is remotely similar to what you're envisioning for the project. Like any type of reference track, anything at all, because that is always going to be at least a basis.
Yeah.
Because from that, I can pull from, okay, they probably like, I might even ask them, what do you like about this track? So then maybe they send me 3 tracks or something. I don't know. They're all from Final Fantasy 16 or something. And they may say, okay, well, I like the strings in that one, or I like the energy in that one, or I like the hybrid style in this one. So getting them to explain what they enjoy about it will at least give me some solid groundwork for where do I begin. And so for something like Call of Saregnar, for example, like Damian sent me, some of the great retro soundtracks, the orchestral stuff. But he was like, let's make it realistic orchestra. And I was like, okay, great. So it's kind of leaning into the compositional styles of those retro games, but the more modern styles of realistic orchestra production, Yeah. So it's always the questions of references and vision, right? Like, what are you envisioning? A great example. I only just started playing Tears of the Kingdom, like last week. I'm very late to the party. But, I imagine for something like that, it's a very different musical approach than, say, a side scroller, right? So even the approach of how do you begin composing for this thing, is it going to be, a bit more ambient? Is it going to be a bit more interactive? Is it going to be mostly loops? So there's all those questions, what I like to call the discovery calls with these developers. It's like figuring out where they are in their head. Like, what is their vision, And then from there, it's trial and error, right? Sometimes it's like, I can write up a main theme. I'm working on a project right now. It's like the main theme, the first iteration I did, it was like, they liked it. Great. Nice. There are other times where it may take 10 versions, right? Before they like land on something. Those first few tracks on a new project are almost always the ones that it takes a bit more iteration,
Yeah.
Because it's getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
What do they like? Oh, they really like that. Okay, well, now I know what to do for the next battle track or the next whatever it may be, right? So
if the mood and style is set, and from then on out, it's more easy to continue the next tracks and the next styles, right?
Yeah, because even like instrumentation. Now, my strong suit is definitely as if I'm just writing for live performers in an orchestra. Like that is 100%. That's like my comfort zone. Anytime I have to kind of move a little bit out of that, it's like, well, we're leaving the Tony Manfredonia comfort zone.
TM.
But yeah, right, exactly. I guess it's landing on, once something is solidified and they like it, then it's building off of that. And maybe even so far as trying something new, right? So maybe it's the next battle track or the next ambient tune, they may say, hey, well, we want this kind of instrument. We want that kind of instrument. Well, then at least you have the groundwork, Then you have the groundwork to build off of.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of Call of Saragnar, because I've been mentioning it to everyone I know, but I'm really really in love with the main theme of Call of Saragnar. It's like I must have heard it probably 1,000 times by now, but it's still every time it comes up, it's like I'm humming along, I'm smiling. It's just for me, it's perfect. It's just perfect.
Thank you.
So yeah, what were your inspirations for the theme? Like where did you draw from, or was it just like the reference tracks from Damian, or was it also something that came like from yourself?
It's funny because that track was written 5 years ago, but it wasn't recorded until 3 years ago. And so I'm honestly trying to think back and like, what was I looking at? What was I reading? Interestingly enough, I think a lot of times the inspirations are more subconscious than directly conscious. Yeah. Like when Damian was like, write a main theme, he wasn't like, here's a main theme for you to emulate. It was just kind of like, write a main theme. And I'm like, okay. So given the old school vibe, the adventurous vibe, I kind of wanted to just go for it. But listening again to it, it makes me think of something. And it reminds me of the orchestration specifically, reminds me of, there's a piece by, his name is Rimsky-Korsakov. He was a composer back in the 1800s, late romantic composer, as they'd say. He has this piece called Scheherazade, this big orchestra thing. And I was listening to that the other day, and I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I was like studying this piece when I wrote the Call of Saragnar main theme, because there are definitely some similarities. Definitely not. It's not like a one-to-one recreation, but there are definitely like similarities in the woodwind writing and all that stuff. So I wonder if I was just looking at that. I wonder if I was just studying that around the time or recently before I made the main theme. Yeah. Totally random, but. I think ultimately I just wanted something big and adventurous. I wanted something that was like not your typical theme that you'd find in a video game coming out today. I wanted it to feel something standalone, something that feels like more than an indie game. I don't know how else to describe it, but hopefully that's close.
Yeah, for the listeners, if you haven't listened to it, like I'm gonna link it in the show notes, but you really should, because it's just it stands on its own as well, and just like you said, it has that adventurous, retro kind of orchestration, and it just fits so well. So, and you also like just mentioned that it was recorded like a few years ago, and it was recorded by a real orchestra live. So that's, I would say, not typical for a small indie project. So how did that come to be?
I just wanted to do it, man. Yeah. I just wanted to, I just was like putting money aside little by little to get that session. Cause even a 30-minute session with Budapest, or even, it was a full symphony, it was a full orchestra with percussion, but like even smaller subsets, it's not cheap. It's not cheap even for 30 minutes. So it's the kind of thing that, I would say a good chunk of larger budgets in like a AAA sphere, let's say something for Sony, they're going to be spending quite a chunk of that for live recordings, especially if they record with like the LA Philharmonic or, one of the more American scoring orchestras, that's going to be a pretty penny. Yeah. So I just wanted to do it. I was like, you know what? I want to be able to do more live recording with an orchestra. And I also want to share with other indie composers that like, nothing's stopping you from doing it.
Yeah,
you just got to do it. It's just like you just got to do it. And so my goal, at least, if the soundtrack obviously allows, stylistically, my dream, my vision is to do at least one live recording for each project that I work on. Because again, it's expensive. Budget may not allow. Budget may literally just be going to my mortgage, right? Depending on what's going on. But I want to do at least one each game. And the game I'm working on now has. It was with Fames. They're called Fames Project. They're based out in Macedonia. Just strings on that one, but I can't say anything else about it, but they sounded great. They sounded great. I'm really excited to share that when I'm allowed. Anyway, I encourage anyone listening who's a composer to be like, just go get your stuff recorded by Budapest or Fames, or there's so many out there where they don't charge an arm and a leg. You may have to spend a little bit, but they don't charge an arm and a leg, and it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yeah. And like, how was the session for you? I mean, you were like, when I remember correctly, you had the live stream with the orchestra while you were being sick, and
Yes.
so it's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure, right? Because you have this limited amount of time, and you need to like get what you want to get out of that, right?
Right. And so, right. I I come from the classical music world is my background. Before I even knew what a DAW was, I mean, I was writing for ensembles and orchestras just from an acoustic standpoint, right? Just I didn't know what Cubase was. And so my philosophy in orchestrating was that they have practice time, that they meet 4, 5, 6 times before they put it on their concert. And, amidst that process, you can change the orchestration. You can say, I don't really like that. Let me change that. With this, you got 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever you book. They're sight reading it. They're literally paid sight readers. And so you need to have everything ready before you even walk in there, virtually or in person. Yeah. And that to me was like terrifying. So I did. I've got a great friend. His name is Evan Rogers. He does a lot of like orchestration for like bigger names, And so I messaged him and I was like, look, man, I'm used to having like 8 rehearsals with a community orchestra and regional orchestras and, whatever. I'm used to having practice time. And he was like, okay, well, this is what you're going to do. So he kind of helped me out. And basically, in short, he gave me a lot of input on having kind of everything pre-written. So like if you don't like something, having the alternative there as well.
Yeah, you can
so you can kind of have them do 2 different takes and kind of cut and paste it together, So it's just a different process. And since then I've worked with scoring orchestras quite a bit since then, but that first journey into it was like pretty terrifying because I wasn't in that world yet. Yeah. I wasn't in that world yet. So it was a great and exciting and terrifying all while I had COVID. I mean, it was just that those 30 minutes felt like they don't even exist. It was like a fever dream. Yeah. But it was a good time.
Yeah, and the result was great. I mean, it's like it sounded great, and I hope you're also happy with the result.
Oh yeah, I'm happy with it. It's just, I mean, as you know, with anything, Ben, it's like now that it's been 5 years later, like how I would orchestrate it differently.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's always that. Heck, even the things I wrote last month, I look at and be like, I wish I could reorchestrate that. So we're always growing, we're always changing. So that's just part of being an artist, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just you have to let go.
Everything's kind of a reflection of that time period of where you were.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that. I mean, sounds that I made a few years ago, I was like, oh, some of them I forgot about, and I listened to them, and I was like, oh, this was great. Who did that? Oh, that was mine. That is awesome. But sometimes it's also like but yeah. On the other hand, I mean, especially for sound, also for orchestration, if you're not like happy with a little piece of it, like for example, you say, I would have done the woodwinds differently or the strings differently, but the overall collective music piece, or for me, like the overall soundscape still holds up. So as long as you're still happy with like the overall feeling of it, I'm guessing that's all right. And everything else you just have to let go, because otherwise you're just like, you just optimize and try to find perfection, and you're never going to reach perfection. So
right, exactly. Oh, 100%. And I'm very happy and satisfied, and I'm so grateful for it. And I really do hope if Call of Saragnar ever picks up, I really would love to do, a kind of video games live style, which would give me an opportunity to potentially do some reorchestrations.
That would be awesome.
But it really is, it does hold up. And I always have to remind myself, no matter what it is that I'm working on, that yes, the other pros, quote unquote, out there may notice certain things or may have, criticisms about it or whatever. But your average, literally 95% of the people actually listening to the theme in the game are probably going to be people who know absolutely nothing about orchestration. Yeah. And so they're looking at the big painting on the wall, whereas I'm looking at the fine details,
Absolutely. Yeah. I can definitely say from my experience that I have no idea about orchestration, and I love it. So
yeah, exactly. There you go. Case closed, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to reveal what I would reorchestrate either. That's going to be my little secret of what I would change.
But when you get the chance to do a remaster of the game in 20 years or something.
Yeah, or like a live, a big, medley or a suite or something, then I can play with, some new colors and whatever. But that day will come when it comes.
Yeah.
1 second. Luna's trying to get in here. I just have to get Luna.
Of course. Cat alarm?
Cat alarm.
Yeah.
She likes this room because it's warm.
Yes.
The computer just, generates the heat, so she just hangs out in here all day.
It also purrs, so they're buddies.
Yeah.
Hi, Luna. Awesome.
There she is.
For the listeners, you can't see it, but there's a very big fluffy cat. She's white grayish and licks herself, just like cats do.
Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to say I recently was at a kind of video games live style concert with where Julie Elvin was singing. She did like the theme for Call of for Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West and other stuff. And there were so many great tracks, like from World of Warcraft and also from Bloodborne, which was amazing, and Blood in the Snow from the God of War Ragnarok. And I can just say, like, for some people that are loving video games but never thought about going to a live concert, just like do it at some point, because even if you're not into like all the orchestration, the kind of emotional connection you get, because even if you're not a fan of video game soundtracks, you're gonna sit there and at some point there comes a track where it's like really hitting you because it connects with the emotional impact the game had on you, and it's well worth it. And usually they're not that expensive, so if you have a chance to see them, live orchestrated video game music is amazing, especially with a great singer. Very well recommended.
Yeah, and I'm a big advocate for that. I mean, that's something I'd like to do more of. Is to get more involved with these orchestras, because it's my philosophy when it comes to video game music. Again, my background is very much about the music. My background is like, I literally started as a singer-songwriter. I got into classical music. I always wanted to do the big orchestra thing because I liked video game soundtracks. My core as a composer for games is like the music, right? And I know we live in a time where it's all about implementation and interactivity, and it's great. It's a beautiful thing, and I commend especially people like Austin Wintory, and some of these champions are doing some ridiculously cool things with the whole interactive element. I came across one on Twitter too, where it's like the combat is musical, essentially, where it's like every hit has like these cool it's like a Legend of Zelda meets, I don't even know, Guitar Hero. It's wild. I mean, it's crazy cool. And for me, it's hard because like I like just making big linear tracks, like that is I love doing that. But I've been playing more with interactivity. But at the end of the day, like my soul when it comes to video game music is really like, let's make something that is a memorable piece of music that can find its way in a video game. Now, whether that approach is endorsed or frowned upon, depending on who's listening, it doesn't matter, because that's really like what I find that it really drives the emotional component of the music. It's like, get a solid piece of music, get a solid track, work it into the game. You may have to change a few things, whatever, but like make the music really good and really memorable. I don't know, that's my philosophy at least, and that's why I'm so excited when I see orchestras just playing. You got 60 people on stage, 80 people on stage, literally all making the same piece, playing the same piece. It's just it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I can't describe it, how it makes me feel, but I love it. It's so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely agree. And I mean, it's just like you said, it's just a different type of approach, because there's a time and place for dynamic music, and for a lot of games nowadays that is the case, because you have so much, just like you said, you have so much interactivity, and you have a certain, I would say, an emotional arc that you need to hit in the time the player reaches it, and not in the time the music takes it. So if you would just like loop a section and then just play the emotional part at some point, like very crudely, it would probably not feel good. But on the other hand, just like you said, you have a problem oftentimes with, like, if you're listening to a soundtrack from a game you really liked and you like the music, and then you listen to the soundtrack on your own, it's like sometimes there's something missing, because I'm guessing they're trying to get from this big, like, I don't know, dynamic music pieces stuck together into a game that's connected to gameplay elements, and then they try to distill it into a track, and it's not the same anymore because it came from this different place. And just like you said, for you it comes from the other side, and so listening to your album from Call of Saragnar is like all those pieces stand on their own, and also, especially for a game like Call of Saragnar, it fits really well because you can have those
Right.
moments where it's like, okay, this piece of music plays now, and it gives you the emotional impact. And even if you take a bit longer to read something, it doesn't matter because it hits at the start of this moment, and it's yeah, it
Right.
works well with the game as well. Yeah.
I agree. I agree with you, especially with there's a time and a place, and it really depends on the game, right? There may come a time. In fact, as I was playing Tears of the Kingdom these days, it's like, man, I'd love to do something like that, where it's a bit more subdued. It's not like, and maybe it's because currently one of the projects I'm working on is literally like full force giant orchestra all the time, and so it can be pretty exhausting to kind of make that happen. But one of the things that like Tears of the Kingdom is really showing me is the power of silence, the power of like how space can really enhance a video game, you know? And it's been really inspiring me. Like I want to do something like that one day for sure.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Speaking about orchestras, like how did you first get to perform with orchestras or like write for orchestras and then like get in contact with that? Was it like from early on, or was it something where it's like, oh, I really want to work more with orchestras, and you like just made that happen?
So yeah, I'll try to, it's a long story short, is one of the reasons I wanted to get into orchestra writing was not only because of the, you know, growing up with Final Fantasy and Legend of Zelda and World of Warcraft, you know, like these big kind of more orchestral soundscapes, but it was really, the turning point was when I saw a video of Coldplay. They played one of their songs from their Rush of Blood to the Head album. The song is called Politic. They played that song with an orchestra. I think it was like the 2002 Grammys. And I was like, that is cool. I was like, I want to learn how to do that, right? Just to, there was something about it, just the nature of it. I was probably like, I don't know, 10 or 11 at that point. I was quite young, but I had no idea where to start. And my music teacher, you know, she's like, well, you should go to school for music composition. And my mom was all about classical music. You know, my dad was more into the big band stuff, but my mom was really into classical music. So I kind of grew up with a bit of the classical music stuff too. So I was like, all right, well, I need to learn how to do this. Whether I go into video game soundtracks or whether I put an orchestra behind my own albums as a songwriter, whatever it is, I need to learn how to write for the orchestra. So I went to music composition school to like just learn how to do this. Like just to, because I kid you not, at my audition, I didn't even know what a string quartet was. My very first entrance exam, I had no idea what a string quartet was. I was that naive. But I think what ended up happening was the more I was learning about this stuff, the more it excited me. You know, rather than it scaring me, rather than being like, oh gosh, this is too much. It was mostly like, okay, that's cool. Okay, that's cool. Wow, that's really cool. And so I really took a deep dive into the concert music, classical music world. You know, getting music played by performers at school, and the end goal throughout all of this really is I want to work my way up to the orchestra.
Yeah.
And so it was really through schooling, and then when I graduated and moved here, you know, again, just reaching out to the local orchestras. Hey, can I do some arranging for you? If you ever need anything, let me know. One thing kind of led to another, and I started working with local orchestras, you know, regional orchestras, and then the Pittsburgh for a contest of theirs. And it was just all this crazy stuff started happening. And so it gave me that solid orchestra foundation that I still, you know, try to learn and study, and I still try to grow every day with all of that. But then I started working on game soundtracks, you know, finding my way through that into that sphere of existence. And then it was basically, like I mentioned before, around 2020, 2021, I was like, okay, well, now that I've been doing all of this for 10 years and I haven't written a song in 10 years or performed it all in 10 years, I want to get back to that because I had some emotional stuff I kind of needed to process a bit, and I had to put that somewhere creatively. And I was like, well, let me now combine forces. When I first started, it was just me and a piano, but now I had this orchestra knowledge, so I'm going to be like, let's throw an orchestra into the mix. Let's do kind of Tony and piano and orchestra, you know, which is more my singer-songwriter side. So it was really just taking a lot of time to learn about it, to actively create stuff for it, to work with local musicians and even faraway musicians in a various types of styles, all kinds of styles and genres, really just kind of leading to me where I am today. Like when you go to my website, that journey is basically the foundation of what I'm doing now, essentially.
Nice. That's very nice. Like you had that lofty goal and work your way through it. And can you maybe discuss a bit about the challenges that you're faced with if you're collaborating with like renowned ensembles and artists, where it's like you have this big orchestra, even if it's a local orchestra, but if you like walk into the room and you have, just like you said, you have like 60 or 80 people and you're like, Tony is coming in there and is working with them. It must be like a bit daunting, right?
It is, because I think knowledge, looking at scores of, say, I don't know, let's say Beethoven or, these greats in the past, looking at their scores and looking at how they orchestrated something and absorbing that information in however way we creatively absorb it and then putting it into our own works, you're never really going to know how that sounds until people play it.
Yeah.
You're never really going to know. Even same thing with the Call of Saragnar main theme. And that's why, frankly, when you have people like John Williams and a team of orchestrators, it makes sense, because it's like the more eyes and the more kind of knowledge people you can have looking at the thing you've created, the better it'll be, because they're going to have their own set of knowledge to say, oh, okay, you may want to change that there. Or someone else will say, okay, maybe the trumpets, I don't know, maybe, bring them down a little bit or whatever it may be. But when it's just me, myself, and I, for those first few years, it's like the only knowledge I'd be getting was just how these people performed it. So like having the Pittsburgh Symphony play something back in 2015, actually, that was 2015. The orchestration, I have to say, like when I look at it now, I'm like, oh my goodness, what was I thinking? But what's wild is that the musicians were so good that it still sounds phenomenal. Like even subpar, quote unquote, orchestration was played brilliantly by these musicians. And so that also plays a factor. So you could have great orchestration, but maybe not the best players. If you have the Los Angeles Philharmonic or whatever, these or the Chicago Symphony Orchestra playing something versus a regional orchestra or even a community orchestra, it's going to sound vastly different. Because then, of course, the hall plays a part. Where is it played? Is it a darker room? Is it a brighter room? So it's the daunting, to answer your question more succinctly, the daunting aspect is not fully knowing what it's going to sound like until you really hear it. Now, 20 years from now, with 20 more years of experience, I'm probably going to have a lot better idea from the get-go, even now versus 10 years ago. It's like I kind of already know what to expect. But 2015, fresh out of college, your boy Tony here had no idea what he was doing.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, probably if you're at that point, you will start to add like, I don't know, maybe weird new instruments that you have no idea about, just to mix things up. And it's like, okay, just add water drums, or I don't know. Yeah. Just so you have that kick again from before, where it's like, you have no idea what this is gonna sound like. That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. That's really interesting, because in my mind, and of course, as I said, I have no idea about orchestration, and I always thought that at some point you're going to write the notes and you're going to know exactly how it sounds like. But you're right. I mean, especially, for example, the room and the players and even the instruments sometimes, they make it vastly different. And if you say like the performance, maybe a very naive question, but how much like leeway do the players have in playing their parts?
So it really depends on the context, right? So number one, I think the knowledge eventually does get to a point. Like even now, like I've witnessed things enough where it's like, okay, I know generally what it's going to sound like now, because I've done it enough, right? But if you haven't really done it enough, you're going to have those questions when you hear them play. You're going to be like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was going to sound like that. But now it's like, now I have such a 10, 15 years almost of more knowledge behind my belt. It's like, okay, I kind of know generally. But I think the players, in terms of their leeway, if it's for a concert, and you have rehearsal time, you can say, okay, change those 16th notes into 8th notes. If they're struggling with the speed of it, for example, or the tempo is a little too fast. Then you can play with that because you have practice time. But with session orchestras, scoring orchestras, again, they're literally sight reading everything in front of them. There's no practice time. So it's having the information readily available, right? Like putting a little staff above, a few measures, like here's an easier alternate option that we can do a take using this. So you want to give them that information preemptively so that you can make those changes on the fly, right? I might have a session with Fame's project. It's going to be, I think, April 6th. So coming up as we record this, where it's like I literally have a sheet to give them, being like, this is what we're going to do in the course of this hour. We're going to, for this section, because the violins are really high, we're going to do an independent take of just the high violins because they're just extremely high, and let's just all get them together. And then we're going to do a take with them an octave below, and then a take with everybody playing together. And then it's like getting those bits and pieces and splicing it together. But it's like, the more I've done this, the more I'm like, okay, they're going to struggle with that. They're going to struggle with that. They're going to struggle with that. So let's give them these little alternate, or these overdubs, as they'd say, in the session world, these overdubs to kind of just go. You don't have to go linearly. It's not a concert. You can have them play certain things in a certain way, take that out, do another take, do whatever you want with it. Almost like you're producing something on the fly. Yeah. It's just two different worlds.
That's very interesting. Cool. Thank you for that insight. That's awesome.
You're welcome. I'll see if you can sit in on the session. I wonder if they allow guests.
Oh, that would be awesome.
If they do, I'll have you.
Unfortunately, the 6th is my 40th birthday party, so I'm gonna be somewhere away. So
well, yeah. I'll be drinking. I'll be drinking to your name.
Thank you.
Perhaps during the session, depending on how nervous I am.
Just wanted to say, if it goes wrong, maybe have something to calm them down. Yeah. But yeah, you briefly mentioned before about your songwriting, and it's also something I wanted to ask about. Maybe sure. We got to like the process of composing for video games, but what's your process about for your songwriting? Because you mentioned like you're doing that more in the evenings, more in your like own time. It's like, oh, this is now my time to like experiment and do my own stuff. Do you have like a set idea that you want to do, or do you sometimes just like jam out and see what comes out of it?
I tend to work in large bulks with this stuff. So there's periods of time where I'm just formulating what's the next chunk of songs going to be, whether it's a single, whether it's an EP, or something, like an album, much bigger. The ideas, the story of it, the concepts tend to happen in their own time. And so there might be evenings for a few months where I'm not really tracking anything, so to speak. Or if I am, it's just piano, basic, chord progression, some vocal lines, that kind of stuff, like on my phone, potentially. Because I tend to think of the big picture first. I'm like, this is what it's going to be about. This is the track order. These are the track names. This is what that song is going to be about. This is what that one's going to be about. And then I go down the list chronologically. I like to do, because I think if the album is meant to tell a chronological story, if it may not, but most of the stuff I do tends to tell kind of a story. I want to create it in that way as well, because I think that will help me convey it better, So even now, I'm kind of working on the next album-ish, and it's a bit summery. It's a bit like if I could put a color on it, it'd be the color yellow and like a light green. It has a bit of that summery kind of honeymoon type vibe to it. Think like Lush strings, maybe not so much giant walls of brass, right? And I already have the track list. It's like there. So now what I'm doing is sitting down to actually put it together. Because I don't know, that's just, I think my favorite albums, my favorite artists, the stuff that stands out to me are the more concept albums, where like there may be little musical themes interwoven into the album, right? Where there's like the first track might have a certain melody that's then restated in the sixth track or something. And I kind of, just as a little fun fact for myself, but I am trying to weave themes throughout my discography. I know that's kind of maybe weird, but I want to create it. So, let's say we got kids, or, at the end of my life, that if people listen to my stuff, it's almost like they're listening to a symphony, in that there's a theme that is there that comes in, and maybe an album, 3 albums later, the love theme or the death theme or the this theme or the that theme, to create it as if it's a big symphonic production, but it's going to be a lifetime of music.
Nice.
That's what I'm going to try to do. Yeah. How effective it'll be, I do not know, but I'm doing my best.
I'm going to invite you back for the 20th anniversary of Field and Foley, and we're going to have to talk again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting, because, I mean, I've made a bit of music just for fun, of course, and it's like a totally different style. But for me, it always was, I mean, sometimes I had certain ideas, but most of the time I played around and the music told me something, and I was like, oh, this is the kind of feeling. And then I leaned into that and worked from there, but not from the other way around. And next time, I want to make it exactly like that. I have an idea for an album, and I have themes, and I have, just like you said, like track titles. And at some point, hopefully, I'll take the time and just work through that. But it's interesting that you're like this disorderly, of course. Of course you are.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I'm a little type A. My wife would have a lot to say about that. I'm a little type A. But it is, it's, I think because I've always been drawn to symphonic writing. Like I've got like underneath my feet, you can't see it, but I have a bunch of scores, Rachmaninoff, you name it. I love the symphonic medium. If it's a 40-minute symphony and there's themes that kind of come in and out, or like an opera, where these like the character theme, or like even like a video game, you got your character themes and your core, play any Final Fantasy game and you're going to hear all kinds of that stuff. So I one of the things I knew, I was like, okay, if I'm going to be doing this whole composer, singer, songwriter split, is I have to make sure that it's not so black and white, that there is a bridge that connects the two. That it's like, okay, if you listen to Tony's video game soundtracks, you're going to appreciate, you may not enjoy all of it, but you're going to at least appreciate the singer-songwriter stuff, or vice versa. If they hear one of my symphonic songwriter tracks, they'll be like, oh, he writes video game soundtracks too. Like, so that I want to make sure that there's at least an overlap. And in order to do that, I have to think like, I'm telling a story, like I'm creating a soundtrack in a way, like creating a soundtrack of my life in a way. It's tricky. It's tricky, and I'm still learning. I'm always learning, but it's something that I'm really excited about this next one, because there's going to be a bit more live recordings on it. There's like a bit more live orchestra, that type of stuff. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see this one unfold. I don't know when it's going to be done, but I chip away at it little by little.
Yeah, that's interesting. And like when you're writing your songs, and I mean, maybe also for the video game soundtracks, what's your ideas about infusing like personal experiences and emotions into that? How do you get that into like a score? Because I know that some scores give me like emotional feedback and give something, connects with some kind of things, and I mean, some things are very easy, like the sad things and the happy themes, but there are more intricate, like complex emotions that you can create with music. And how do you do that? How do you do magic, Tony?
Oh, this is the golden question. Ben, it's a challenge sometimes, because I think there are days where, if you want to think of it like the stars align, where it's like you're tasked with writing, let's say, Charon's Crypt, great example. Okay, Charon's Crypt, game came out, I think a couple years ago now, but I wrote that soundtrack a long time ago. Wrote that soundtrack, I think I finished it in like 2019. The game didn't come out until 2022. But there was this kind of sad closer track. I think that the track itself, if people want to listen to it, it's called Even Death May Die. And even the credits, it's basically like a piano version of that track. But I remember they wanted it to feel like you lost somebody. And I didn't lose anyone at that time yet. This is 2019, but I was going like there was a lot of challenging health related things happening in my life. You know, in my wife's life, there was just a lot of challenge. There was a lot of like, how are we going to get past this? And so like in that moment, okay, finding those types of feelings and putting them into a track for a game that needs to be sad was like extremely easy. I don't want to say I was sort of capitalizing off of those difficult times, but there was a certain stars aligned with where I was emotionally and what the track needed emotionally, right? Like it just worked out. And in fact, it actually really helped, you know, to kind of put that somewhere musically. And it was also for a game, you know, like it just worked out in a weird way. But then there are other times where it's like you're like grasping at straws because it's like, you may be in a certain headspace, or maybe you're just so busy with life, you know, or maybe, I don't know, you have family visiting or whatever. Like your brain is everywhere. And you have to make this super emotional, like the super, super final boss beyond the final boss type track where you got a choir, you've got an organ, you've got Latin lyrics. And sometimes when your head is not there because you have 1,000 other things to do, it is like grasping at straws. It's like, I just can't rope myself back in. And that has happened recently. In fact, like I'm using this as a real example here, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, it can be so hard. And I think that's where I encourage not only to myself, but anyone listening, why it's so important to have that routine. Because it's at least a little bit easier if your brain is used to sitting down at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. or 9 p.m. or whenever it is that you sit down to make music. If it is a routine, it is a like on your schedule every day, it's going to be easier to just put something on the page. And a great example is what I put on the page. Developers were not keen on for like the final 2 minutes of that track. And they're like, you got to rewrite it. And I'm like, oh, that's a lot to rewrite for that kind of music. However, what I was, you know, looking at it from a place of positivity, I suppose. It's like, well, at least I got the junk out. At least those 2 minutes of garbage are no longer there. And now whatever's going to be next is going to be a lot better, right? Because now I'm in a better headspace. It's like, okay, well, I know they didn't like these things, so now I can do this. But that's why I think it's critical to have that designated time and space to do things regularly, because it's going to be easier to pull something out of yourself if you can rely on the schedule. You know? I don't know. Again, I'm kind of a type A in that regard, but it is helpful. It is helpful. You know, anyway, I don't know if that really answers your question, but it was the best I could do.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, it's not about, I'm not asking questions to get like the perfect answer to that question. I just like to provoke some thoughts and see what comes out of that. And that was beautiful put. And I can totally relate to that kind of routine that, even if you're a creative type, and we all know that creative work is weird and comes at the most, I don't know, unacceptable moments where it's like, oh shit, I would love to like just run home now and write something or paint something or something like that. But even then, it's just like you said, it's important to have those routines, because then you can kind of trick your mind into channeling those moments into the right time slots. And I don't know, sometimes your mind is then your friend and just works the way you want them to. So
yeah, and I think it's really important to have time not creating.
Yeah.
You know, that's something I've always struggled with.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something I still struggle with, but I do my best to make it very, 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 you know, clear to myself, and in my calendar and everywhere I write down my stuff, is to like get outside, do something else, like at least a few times a week. You know, to not think about work and to just let the brain simmer. Let the brain do what it needs to do. And, you know, sometimes that might mean that tracks take longer to make. Okay. But if you're on a tight deadline, okay, well, drink some coffee and do the best you can. But if you have the schedule to allow it, to just really take time to actually live life as life outside, away from the craft, because those are the experiences that then you will bring into the actual creations, whether it be a soundtrack or just music as music. You know, I find I'm always kind of drawing from life experiences in the soundtracks in some capacity, you know, even though it's for a video game. It's like, well, it's because I went through grief or because I went through joy and excitement that I'm able to then put that somewhere. It's not just notes on a page. It's not just well-formulated music, because that's what Bach did really well, but a lot of his music starts to sound the same because it's just a very meticulously designed, you know, it's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I geek out about it, but it's like, it's all about the design of it, in a lot of the cases. Whereas like when you're dealing with characters and worlds and stories, it's like, if you can bring your own life story to the table musically, like what a gift that is, you know? How amazing that is. Because then when people play this game, where they hear your music or they hear your album, whatever it is, they get to hear a piece of you and your life experience. And it's just, I mean, I think that's why I still love working in the video game music, the game industry as a whole, because it's like, yes, I may have all these kind of goals to do my albums with an orchestra and whatever, but it's like, the reason why I kind of still love the game soundtrack stuff is because it's, in a way, you're always connecting with people's stories, whether even through the art design or the sound design. It's like you're witnessing someone's human experience behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Like, hate to say it so point blank, but like AI can never replace that. Like, yeah. It's yeah, I don't know. There's something about the human connection in the field that I adore.
Yeah, I agree fully with you. Like the whole point of it is, and I'm guessing like Tyler is the person that always says it, like the whole point is connecting with people and finding those connections. Right. And that's what, not only, I mean, the listener or the player gets a connection and gets something from it. And I'm guessing most people that also listen to this podcast have at least one or two pieces of art that like really, really like blew their minds and opened their hearts and made them feel things. And at some point they know that a human made those things, and some things that those human made had like personal experiences. So on that level, you will always be connected through that experience, and that is a wonderful thing. Yeah.
And I think that's why I've always been drawn to concerts, right? Even like, okay, how I craft my music. It's like, I even if it's his first soundtrack, it's like, okay, if this thing is ever put on a concert, it's like, I want to be ready for that. I want to make sure that I have everything, my ducks lined in a row, so that, let's say it blows up and I don't know, the video game's live director's like, hey, you got to arrange for that? It's like, yep, I do. Here it is. You know, like I want to be ready for that, because I think concerts, whether rock concert, rap concert, pop concert, if you've been to the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, I'm sure you know the drill, where it's amazing to see like how many people are there for the same thing, you know? And like, you could be sitting next to a stranger. Like I'm like the number one Coldplay fan in the world, but the band doesn't know it kind of fan, you know? Where it's like, I could be at one of their concerts sitting next to a complete stranger and I could strike up a conversation and like walk away with a new friend, simply because we're there for a mutual reason. And that's why I think concerts as a whole, when you have a sea of people just cheering and clapping, and especially like the video game orchestra concerts, it's very much not hoity-toity at all. Like people scream and shout, and I mean I love video game music live, because there are no rules, and it's amazing. It's amazing. It's not like, make sure you clap in between movements, you know, which has a time and a place, but it's like, it's amazing to see the camaraderie, you know, and you walk away just feeling uplifted. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
I can absolutely agree. I just last week I was with my wife. I was seeing Idols live, which is one of my favorite new bands that I discovered a few years ago.
Nice.
And it was just, I mean, for me, it's like the metal crowd was always my kind of thing, and it was always interesting to me, that kind of blend of, you have this very heavy music. Sometimes people literally just screaming into a microphone, and people, I mean, a mosh pit looks just like blood violence, but when you're there, it's actually it's the most caring environment you can think of, because I was in the Idols concert, like right in front in a mosh pit, and I could tie my shoe because 2 people were just holding me. They were seeing that I was trying to tie my shoe, and 2 people were just holding me up from 2 sides and like looking if I was done, and it's like, yeah, thank you. So, and you could, whenever you want to just like go up, you just point upwards and some big guy just throws you up, and then the crowd carries you up front. And that's something that, yeah, I always enjoy that kind of experiences. And it came usually from the metal scene, but I'm guessing it's spread through other genres as well. But whenever I was at a very heavy metal concert, it was always the most caring group. When someone falls, everyone makes space. Everyone like makes sure nobody, gets hurt, and checks on them and looks them in the eyes and actually tries to like see them. It's like, hey, are you okay? You okay? If not, people carry you out, and it's just this kind of connection, because everyone is there to have fun. Everyone is there because they love the music, and not just the music in a way of, oh man, I love techno and I love just partying 8 hours, but it's like the whole connection part of it, and the whole what kind of emotions are in that music that connects the people. And that was a weird rant, but still.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's really it's what you just described is one of the reasons why, truth be told, why I wanted to no longer just be kind of this guy who makes soundtracks, but also this guy who makes soundtracks and tells stories through this other, more, I would say, quote unquote, mainstream music, right? Just more alt rock, symphonic rock type stuff. Because it's like, I just wanted to have that direct connection to listeners, nothing in between.
Yeah.
And I think the art form, whether it be film or video games, like it's its own beautiful connective tissue from creator to audience. But there's something, at least for me, there's something extremely special, like what you just described, where it's like you have the people there who wrote the music, who recorded the music, sharing it to the people who love the music and the stories behind it and whatever it got them through in life potentially, like whatever the music helped them work through. That was like my motivation of like, I really, this is what truly got me into music. When I first started like geeking out about music, I was playing World of Warcraft, loving that soundtrack. But then when I got tired of that music, I'd be listening to Coldplay, right? Like it was this like both worlds combined, that I was like, I want to get back to that. I want to make more of that. I want to just reach listeners for the sake of the music with nothing in between, because that's its own special bubble, Yeah. And there are lots of special bubbles in the world, whether, again, all kinds of art forms out there. It's like whatever bubble you want to sit in. Gosh, I don't even know this is the weirdest metaphor I've ever used.
Whatever ice bath you're in.
Yeah, right. Whatever ice bath you're in, whatever ocean you're in, like there's so much opportunity. And again, I think it's a mission of mine. I really want to help other composers realize. I think there's a false assumption out there, kind of unspoken, sometimes actively spoken, where it's like, well, you have to be a film composer and be in the film world, or you have to be a games composer and be in the games world, or concert music, or whatever it is. You have to sit in your own little box and do nothing else but that box. And I'm like, can we all like look at Danny Elfman for a second and see that he's like the Oingo Boingo mastermind and a film composer and has the craziest violin concerto on the planet? Like how he has effectively done all these things. Can we all like just open our boxes a little bit? I want to help spread that message too, that it's okay. Yeah. It's okay to be in a couple boxes at once, or bubbles. Absolutely. Or ice baths.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And I don't have a segue to the next question, but it's a question that I have to ask before we finish the podcast, because it's my all-time question. What is the first sound you ever recorded, and why did you record it? And I'm very interested to hear.
Oh man, first sound I ever recorded. Why did I record it? Holy cow. All right, so, okay, I have a question for you, because this will help me. Like, official recording? Or, like, something I did with, my siblings as a kid?
What first comes to mind? Because what is official? What is an official recording? I mean...
All right, so...
You can choose whatever.
I wonder if I still have it.
Oh, you still have it?
I still have it.
If you still have it, we have to put it in the show.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if we want to put it in the show. So what we would do, my brother and my sister and I, when we were kids, so my dad worked in radio, when he
Nice.
was an adult. Gosh, my dad was an adult the whole time. My dad has worked in radio his whole life. We grew up with my dad working in radio. And so we kind of just got a kick out of doing the whole radio shtick.
Of course.
And we would get little cassette tapes. Kid you not, get cassette tapes and like play the I don't know, the shop music from like Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and like write lyrics and record ourselves singing these lyrics to like the Clock Town theme from Majora's Mask. Like ridiculous stuff, but it was this. And we would create our own little radio shows, like featuring these other singers, and we'd all like change our voices to do something silly and ridiculous. But it was always these like weird cover songs of video game soundtracks with lyrics. A lot of Legend of Zelda, in fact. A lot of Legend of Zelda, a lot of Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy IV, like adding lyrics to the Chocobo theme and stuff. Anyway.
I was just thinking about the Chocobo theme. It's so weird.
So like that was my first entry into recording anything.
That's awesome.
I definitely have them, but I don't think I want to play them.
No. Also, if it's Nintendo music on there, it's gonna be a nightmare copyright
Get
wise.
flagged. Yeah.
But that's wonderful, man. That's a wonderful story. And I used to also, like, whenever I heard the Chocobo theme, I had it stuck in my head for weeks, and I would just, like, also in my head just create lyrics and hum
Little lyrics, yeah.
because it's just such a fun song, yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah, that's awesome. A very nice answer.
And I love how that theme is transformed.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you listen to the one from, I don't know, Final Fantasy 1 probably, and, like, how it's morphed over the years, it's always so cool to hear.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, so the only thing really left to do is if you have any projects coming up, anything you want to shout out or anyone, feel free to shamelessly self-promote now.
Like coming out or things that have recently come out?
Whatever you want to put in the spotlight. Or can, because NDAs, I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because the things I'm working on now, I kind of can't talk about. So I think if people want to get a sense of sort of what I'm doing or recently released things, my website, Manfredonia Music, is a great hub spot. It's there that you'll be able to hear the trailer that I did for the Minecraft Universal Studios Experience DLC. And if you actually get that, you can hear a bit more of my music. I did the Jaws ride, the E.T. ride, and there's a little San Francisco location. I did the music for that too.
Nice.
So that's probably the most recent video game that's come out. I've been working on a game since June 2022 that I cannot say a word about. I have one more year to make the music for. I don't know when it's ever going to come out and when it'll be out. They haven't told me that. So I can't say anything about that, but it's like, I'm so excited about it because it's very Tony Manfredonia TM. Like it's just like just literally everything about my music in one. But you can slash all that out because man's like, I want to talk about it, but I can't. I guess if you want to check out some of my, cinematic singer-songwriter stuff, my recently released Anchored is a great example of that. It's a bit heavy material, but it's really sums up kind of my love of concept albums and shamelessly and to provide hope, sort of telling my own story in a way. Also, the Lost at Sea EP is a great example of that as well. But really coming up, I mean, just stay tuned with Call of Saragnar. Stay tuned with Evercraft Online. That's a little bit more like actually retro. That's like if you took my orchestral style and put it in a Roland keyboard.
Nice.
But from like 1995. It sounds like Warcraft 2. It's wonderful. I love working on that. Yeah, I just say check me out anywhere, manfredoniamusic.com, anywhere I'm on all the social medias. So follow me, say hello. I don't bite. I'd love to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you again for being on the show, man. It was a pleasure to have you on.
You're welcome, Ben. Thank you.
Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting on patreon.com/fieldandfoley or ko-fi.com/fieldandfoley, where you gain early access to episodes in lossless format and can submit questions for our guests. Thank you for listening.